If you were looking for the most boneheaded excuse for speech as violence, I've got just the right video for you. Watch Tucker Carlson almost in a confused facepalm as a supposed university professor and Antifa supporter Mike Isaacson drones on about how his organization uses fascist tactics to ironically fight fascism.
So your position, tell me if I'm mischaracterizing this, is people you define as fascist do not have free speech rights?
No. My position is that communities have the right to defend themselves against groups that actively seek to eliminate members of that community.
Defend themselves against violence or defend themselves
against violence? I mean, we were talking about...
No, but physical violence? So if I say, for example...
We're talking about a history, a group that has a history of enacting hate crimes. Yeah, no, we're not... Are we going to pretend like we're suddenly in this ahistorical world where Dylan Roof or Wade Michael Page doesn't exist, where Anders Breivik doesn't exist? Are you kidding me?
No. Are you really a professor, by the way?
What?
What? That's the most vague defense of conflating speech and violence I've ever seen. Now, I think it's deliberately so. I look up the far-left group he heads called Smash Racism, and I wasn't surprised to see a list of vigilante vandalism they've committed, especially during the BLM protests back in 2020. When you're on the far left, everything else seems on the right, and when speech is considered violence, you allow yourself to use violence to quell speech. There's a name for it, isn't there? Oh, right. Tyranny of the majority. Which sounds exactly like the fascism this guy thinks that he's fighting.
I want to know, like, the concept of self-defense is a legal concept, but it's also got, like, a long history and tradition in common law. So the idea is if I'm hitting you, if I strike you physically, if I physically commit violence against you, you have a right to commit violence back in order to protect yourself or your property.
Sure.
But you're seeming to say that anybody who has espoused ideas that have at some point in history led to violence can be the subject of violence from you. You're not saying that.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I believe it is the right for communities to get together to assess what is a threat to them and to defend themselves against that threat.
What does that even mean? Are we going by the group's sensitivities to deliver mob justice? It's a smoke and mirrors put up to retain a degree of plausible deniability, but we all know where the tactics of the so-called Antifa movements lead. It is estimated that the damage caused by these scattered and decentralized far-left groups caused over $2 billion in damage and vandalism in 2020 alone. And by the way, don't be swayed into the vagueness of this supposed professor's words. He's been in very explicit support of using outright violence and threats to subdue ideas he does not like. Most offensively, he made a career-ending tweet back in 2017 that read, and I quote, "Some of y'all might think it sucks being an anti-fascist teaching at John Jay College, but I think it's a privilege to teach future dead cops." He was immediately suspended from his position, and rightly so. Even drawing ire from the then New York Mayor Bill de Blasio for these vile comments.
You shut people down, you prevent them from speaking, and you commit violence against them. I know a number of people, well, don't tell me it's untrue, I know people who've been knocked down and beaten by people from Antifa. So that is true, it does happen, we have it on tape, we just roll the tape.
Right.
So you're saying, is that justified?
Yes. I believe that communities have the right to defend themselves against threats to their community.
Against ideas they don't like.
No,
they have a right to commit violence.
People who have explicitly said that they want to eliminate those people from our society.
But you're conflating violence with ideas.
No,
if I have not raised my hand to strike you, you have no right to strike me.
But in order to raise your hand to strike me, you have to think that you're going to strike me.
Now we get to the heart of it, don't we? It was never about actions, but about ideas. It's the most vivid and violent form of Orwellian thought policing in existence. And they're not even hiding it anymore. I wish Tucker Carlson was back on mainstream television because it was such a joy seeing him bring on guests from basically the general public, resulting in moments of both concern and hilarity at the state of this country.
You have security is because ultimately that security provides a space for nonviolent civil discourse, which is ultimately what we want.
Oh, no, slow down. There are a million distinctions here, but you don't own the public square. You don't own the street.
But I believe the public owns the public square. And at the end of the day,
you're not in charge of the public, and you're not in charge of deciding.
Okay. We are talking about a system that has been gerrymandering people out of public representation. Okay, if we're relying on the cops, ultimately those cops are working for the very people that you work for, and not in the interest of the vast majority of society.
Yeah, but I thought you wanted to defund the police, didn't you? Was it just so you could be the police yourselves? And doesn't he realize he's literally striking at the knee of his own ideas? The police don't turn to violence against ideas they don't like. The fact that Tucker Carlson or Fox News have security is so they can hear ideas like this guy's without fearing that someone who doesn't like them will come and preemptively engage in mob vigilantism for the sake of some slanted social justice cause.
Do you teach students?
I do.
And do you teach them that the First Amendment does not apply to people they disagree with?
I teach them to think critically, and that's why I'm very open about my anti-fascism and my anarchism.
So if someone in your class said, you know what, I'm a Trump voter, I'm against affirmative action.
I've had those, and I encourage them to research and explore and hold them to the exact same standards that I hold any other student.
Yeah, I bet.
I do.
Yeah,
I had an alt-right supporter actually in my class last semester. Yeah. I worked with him on his papers. He started off kind of bad at citation. I got him better at citation, and he wrote a paper that was an A paper.
So even Trump is alt-right now, apparently? That smirk on Tucker Carlson's face after that comment just shows that he's realized this guy's a lost cause. If Donald Trump is the alt-right, then living with 75 million of his voters would be a nightmare. But of course, that's a nightmare he doesn't live in except for his own head. I'm always intrigued yet worried at how easy it is for people's sense of self-righteousness in their own ideas to turn to the justification of violence against the entire other side. That's exactly what the First Amendment was meant to protect against, and thank God for that. Right now, if Mike Isaacson is the kind of professor we have in our university system, then I'm struggling to hold out hope for this country.